Good evening, hello, guten tag, whatever you are, salutations. This is the Velocity of Now, episode number 22. The date is the 15th of December 2013. I welcome you to the show. Tonight, my name is Thomas Sheridan. My website is www.thomassheridanarts.com. There you can find links to all my work, my blog, and any way you can support me would be great. I'd prefer to be a book. But even by sharing my pages, if you have no money, that even helps me. Now, on my blog tonight too, there's an article I want you to see, thomassheridanarts.com, written by, well, it's written by me, but it links to an article by Kira Young, talking about last night's Psychopath Night on Channel 4, which all the Guardian readers and those types all sat down and were tickled pink by this very important information. We need to know this. And no doubt 90% of those gobshites were the ones who appeared on my first Labyrinth of the Psychopath video nearly 4 years ago going, what are you on about? You have no qualifications. It makes no sense. What are you on about? And there they all were last night. The same ones, I guarantee you, riveted by listening to Professor Kevin Dutton tell you that you must embrace your inner psychopath, which unfortunately does not include your inner Jimmy Savile. They just tried to make it sound like psychopaths were cool, fun, sexy, quirky, a little bit dangerous, but where would we be without them? God loved them. Now, Kira Young actually challenged Professor Dutton on his Facebook page, and it's an interesting discourse, shall we say. He talks just like a politician, and then he practically says to her at the end, "Oh, hurry along now with your, you don't know about these things like epigenetics and so on." And it's pretty typical of what I expected. The whole thing is a joke. It's a whitewash. I'm sure most people won't fall for it, just like they didn't fall for Emmy Thomas's book, Confessions of a Sociopath. They're just trying to normalize the thing so they get a new layer of camouflage bullshit, so they blend better into society. It's not going to work, and guess what, folks? It just proves we're winning. We have them on the run with the Savile thing, we have them on the run with the psychopath thing, and they're desperately trying to create a new normal because we're onto them. Do you ever think about that one? We're actually winning. We're winning here. You don't need a revolution. We've got evolution on our side. Eyes on the prize. So that's at thomassheridanarts.com, and just click on the thing that says official blog, and I'll bring you to the article called The Psychopath Warrior Gene Bullshit Again. Now, and there's loads of other things there too as well. As I issue forth this from the Type 1 Radio Network, we have Steve on tonight. We're going to be playing some Kate Bush tunes later on. Adam from CerebralRevolt.com is going to come in for a nice long conversation about the DMT psyop. And before you lose your head saying, oh, he's trying to get DMT banned. Listen, I don't care if you inject, toilet cleaner into your veins, or that's freedom. I want you to have access to any drugs, anything you want. I'm not saying, warning you in a prudish way that these things should be banned. I'm just telling you, when the mainstream starts pushing anything, just like they're pushing with the psychopath stuff, beware. That's all I'm saying, and that's all Adam is going to be saying as well. We're not demanding that this, that drugs be stopped or anything. If you want to spend the rest of your life getting wasted, good luck to you. Good luck. They should all be legalized. We're just saying that when the establishment starts saying, hey guys, there's this cool new drug called DMT. It's in ayahuasca, and it's called psilocybin, another version of it too. And if you take it, you'll get all spiritual, and we should give it to our politicians. And it's wonderful. You remember that film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? Do you remember the scene where the sweet catcher? Remember that? The child catcher, and he had a sweet wagon. I think it was Lemon Roster played the part from The Rise and Fall of Reggie Perrin, but he was the child catcher. And the children go out and they see and goes, lots of lollipops, all the flavors you want, sweets, bubble gum, gumdrops, all the colours of the rainbow, children. And then he invites them into a sweet wagon, and then the sides fall off, a cage comes down, and the children are taken off by the child catcher. It was a trap to get them in. Well, this DMT thing, folks, is the same thing. Psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca, salvia, all the colours of the rainbows. Now, that's what the show is about. Now, it's been a funny all week, I have to say. If I didn't believe in astrology, I think I do now. Someone had said that, I think they said the moon was in Aries, whatever that means, that this would make people confrontational and argumentative. By Jesus, I have to deal with that this week in spades. I was getting all kinds of people, I was getting all these kinds of Guardian readers again, or people who think they're oh so clever because they've seen the Richard Dawkins video, emailing me and demanding to know where my scientific research was, where my papers were. And yet one of these doofuses actually said to me, I'm doing this in private messages because I do not want to discuss this on my Facebook wall. Yeah, that's because I'd ripped the tits off you. You know that, and you didn't want to look like a fool in front of your scientific friends. And then I had this other guy who said to me, he demanded to know, I want to see the original review of your presentation in front of the Irish Mental Health Board. So he could find out that they actually laughed me out of the room. I mean, this is what it's been like all this week. All these kinds of, uber muppets coming out of nowhere looking for a scrap. And you know what my story with that is? I'm polite up to a point. Once the wanker emerges, shut the door, no contact ever again. Boom, you're gone. That doesn't mean I'm afraid of criticism or debate. I'm not going to deal with wankery because I have work to do. You have work to do. And we cannot let these, shall we say, thorns get in the way of our personal and collective evolution as human beings. Speaking of which, Paul Clark, who's a lovely fella in Dublin, has made what I think is an amazing film. It's beautiful documentary. It's an hour and a half long, and it's his first film he ever made, and I can't believe the job he's done. It's called Let Us Rise. You can see it at paulclark.ie. That's I'm always coughing on the show. That's CLA. Oh, it's like Nicotine Star Child, but I don't think we're having the transmission tonight. It's Paul Clark, CLARKE.com or .ie. One of the others. Just type in Paul Clark with an E, Let Us Rise, and you'll find it on YouTube and that Vimeo thing, which doesn't work too good. But it's a very good film, even though it deals with sort of history of how the Irish Constitution was written in 1922, and absolutely horrible. It puts, what was done to the people behind it who were trying to make the best constitution they could in the limitations they were working with, and how Winston Churchill and the British authorities did everything to try and start a civil war in Ireland, basically, and got their way, and how it puts a very personal face on history, but it also shows you that what happened in Ireland is just a microcosm and a reflection of what's happening in all the countries. So it sort of takes you through that, and I'm featured in it, and so are a few other people like Max Egan and General Salenti. It's a very, very good film, and if you have an hour and a half to kill and want to watch a very, very well-made, beautifully made, I might add, documentary, watch Let Us Rise, made by Paul Clark. And what else happened this week? Oh, God love him, poor Lloyd Pye died. Now, I'm not into that stuff. You know me, I'm not into aliens, and I don't believe that aliens have ever visited the earth. And I always thought that Star Child skull, well, to me, it looked just like human deformities that I've seen in medical, cabinets. The deformities that caused humans to have those shaped skulls, and those kids are all over the world, especially when you have the depleted uranium thing. Horrifically, it's happening kids in the Middle East that have those shaped skulls. And that's what I think his Star Child skull was. But having said that, the man did some other wonderful work, okay? So let's not just put his entire body of work down to the Star Child skull. That's just my opinion of it. Maybe I'm wrong. But he was a lovely man, and I met him once, and it was in Manchester in 2012 at the Esoteric Agenda Conference, and he was speaking after me. And he came up to me, and he was very praising of my work, a perfect gentleman. And so, a lovely fella, and he's gone now. He's left this planet, gone on wherever the next journey is. And so Lloyd Pye, even though I didn't agree with all the stuff you said, the world is a better place for people like you, because we need people who see things differently, because even if they don't see it in the correct way, they'll always pull out nuggets of truth that will steer you towards real realizations, actual realizations. So, Lloyd Pye. I had a weird synchronicity that day as well. I went to an art framing place where they make up presentation mats for my prints and my artwork, and somebody, just after I'd heard the news, somebody was making a presentation of a record. It was a 7-inch single that some guy had made back in the 60s, and the record label was Pye, P-Y-E. And the single had something, the title of the single was Now You're Gone. So I thought that was an interesting synchronicity. But then again, my life is filled with those interesting synchronicities, because once you follow the creative path and you move according to intention and you try to follow that as much as possible, you realize that the universe has a magical destiny, and you get there. In your real life, every day of the week, you realize there are no coincidences. Everything has an unfoldment that's magical, and you don't need the psilocybins or the DMTs to get, or getting stoned or alcohol or anything to get there. You can do without that stuff. I made a new song parody the other day. It was Henry Kissinger doing Hello by Lionel Richie. It came out quite funny. That's on YouTube. Check that out. I've also did a couple of new YouTube videos. One on horse meat, the horse meat ritual, and how the royals are trying to push that kind of eating horses into our faces. You can check that out. There's a funny another video I did there, putting down there, critiquing, should I say, critiquing the upcoming Psychopath Night on Channel 4. Steve has just informed me that Robert Helpman played the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Very good film, by the way. As kids' films go, it's one of the better ones from that period. Benny Hill is in that too, Dick Van Dyke, and a few other people that were very talented. Now, here's a doozy of a conspiracy thing I've never heard anyone talk about before, but it's an interesting one, because it's one of those things that I'd forgotten about it, that someone had told me this years ago. You read an article somewhere and it pops up and you go, oh my God, that's what that guy told me. A neighbour of mine is a former Royal Navy seaman. He was involved in radar, I think he said he was involved in, and he's retired now. And he told me years ago that there are islands around the world, and some of them are quite sizable in their size, that are not listed on any maps or charts. They're just not listed on maps, or they're not listed on charts. They are there's a secret agreement or a combined agreement between governments to all pretend that these islands don't exist. And apparently there's quite a few of them around Ireland. There's a couple in the Baltic, and there's a few of them in the South Pacific. And they're used for reasons we don't know. Now, could you hide an island in the modern times? It would be very difficult, but human perceptions are very strange things. Now, one of the places this guy told me there was an island that's not on the maps, is about a couple of 100 miles off the southwest coast of Cork, which is where the legendary Hy-Brasil, Hybrsil, is supposed to be. An island that vanishes every few years in mythology. But he told me there is an island down there. And he said, these islands are not huge now. They'd be like 25 square miles at the biggest. So they'd be like 5 miles by 5 miles. That'd be the very biggest ones. And he says they're used for the one that was down about 200 miles off the coast of Cork was used in the 1950s by the British Space exploration. When the UK had a space program, and they were starting to test rocketing before they fell way behind the Americans and the Russians, the Soviets, because they got all the best Nazis. They were testing their rockets down there, as were the French, I heard. And the island does exist. It's not on any map. And if any ship goes down on it, they fudge the data to say that, you know, the ship just went down at sea or something like that. You hear all kinds of nefarious things that they're used for torturing prisoners, hiding special military programs that make sense. But apparently all these islands, if you see them from the distance or you see them up close, they just look like they have grass growing up and trees. They don't look like they have bases on them, which would imply that these bases are actually probably, if they do exist, and these islands do exist, they're under the ground. Maybe entered via submarine chambers, because, you know, similar to what, you know, was done around Norway and places like that, where the submarines were, entrances were tunneled under the fjords. Now, I was reading 14 Times, last month's one. That was 14 Times 307, and it was November 2013. And this guy, there's a section in 14 Times, it's one of my favorite parts, it's called, it happened to me, where people talk about strange paranormal experiences, weird coincidences, or just strange things they experienced in their life. And this guy said he was flying from Cardiff in Wales to Belfast in Northern Ireland on a holiday a few years ago. And he said just as he expected, he flew across the Isle of Man, and there was the Isle of Man. And then when he said they got a little further, he said quite clearly was a good-sized island that was not the Isle of Man. Now, there's no island up there. Now, when I first read this article, the first thing I thought he was saying was Strangford Lough, which kind of curves around County Down. And if you saw it from the distance, it might look like a long island, but he didn't describe it as a long island. And he said he saw the sea all the way around it. And he asked the same question in the article. Is there actually an island there that the British and Irish government tell nobody about, that they don't talk about? And how would you hide an island like that? Well, it'd be very easy to get the US Navy not to include it on Google Satellite. Most people flying have no concept of geography. Remember that. And pilots wouldn't necessarily pay much attention to it either. Once it's not a gigantic island. And another thing too is you could very easily hide them by generating large amounts of steam on the island, similar to the cooling towers that you would have around, you know, power stations, to just create a big cloud or fog bank around it. And that's another thing too, legends and stories of islands that are surrounded in mist, and you often wonder if they're codes. You know that movie King Kong? Remember how the island was? There was a circle of mist around the island, and in the middle the island was inside the mist. You know, you wonder if that was, you know, it was made in the 1930s, if that was like a code, someone had experienced that, an island somewhere that's hidden. Because when you think about it, it's the ultimate place to get something done. My guess would be if those kinds of islands exist around here, it's something to do with the royal family. Now, your man who wrote the letter to 14 Times, he said that the island was, he said it had to look at the agriculture had been done on it, which makes no sense with a secret island at first. But then when you think about it, most people are flying over, they would see, I don't know what that island is, and then they would see tilled fields and hedgerows, and then just go, oh, it must be part of the Isle of Man or a bit of Northern Ireland or something. But I found that very interesting that this came up at that time. That you could have these hidden islands. What better place to do your torturing, to do your human experimentation? What better place for royal families to go and hide out in danger? When you think about that years ago, say at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, an island for the British royal family to hide out on would have been very useful. The French probably would have respected it because it was all Freemasons anyway behind that war. But you know that kind of thing. There was always that joke in the goodies where they showed it was the end of the world, and they said that the royal family is leaving Buckingham Palace, and they switch on the TV and there's a picture of a Saturn V rocket taking off into space. You see, they would have means to escape that they wouldn't tell us about. This would be part of like protecting their royal lineage, you know, protecting the seed at any cost. This is why the murder of the Romanovs in the early Soviet Union left such a seismic and cataclysmic shock around the world. The very thought that a royal bloodline was wiped out, well, one part of the royal bloodline was wiped out, was beyond shocking to the world. Even the fellas who did the shooting, they were shaking in terror themselves. One of the reasons, because they just couldn't. Killing a royal was like killing a god. They've cultivated this notion of being superhuman. In fact, the assassins that killed the Romanovs thought at first when they were shooting them they had superhuman powers because the bullets are bouncing off them. What would happen was that they had sewed all their diamonds and rubies into their clothes, and they were deflecting the bullets. But it just goes to show you. It just goes to show you that the lengths that they would do to protect royalty. And one of them, I think, if you're going to have one place that they would secretly sequester them during hard times, would definitely be islands. Is there a secret hidden island in the Irish Sea, north of the Isle of Man, between Ireland and Britain, that the two governments act as if it doesn't exist? I find that one kind of hard to believe because it's not a particularly large seaway. There'd be so many people out that way on fishing boats and stuff that you couldn't keep that one quiet. But yeah, out in the Atlantic, I could definitely see them hiding it. No problem, because you're not going to get many fishermen going out that far. You're not going to get many reasons, and the transatlantic flights would probably miss that part, that area, so people wouldn't see. And like I said, they could generate steam all around it. Then it's hidden in a cloud bank, and you wouldn't know. It would just look like a cloud from the sky. Strange days, strange world, and there's always, when you think you hear all the conspiracy theories you're ever going to hear, another one comes along. So secret islands. If anyone can steer me some information on that, hidden islands that are hidden, so I'm sure they definitely do exist. I'm sure they have to exist in places like Alaska, up down around the Aleutian Islands, or remote parts of the South Pacific. There has to be secret islands not on the chart. And there is also a story of an island that was charted for years and years and years and suddenly disappeared off the maps around World War One, somewhere around New Guinea. And that could be one of them too as well. But one existing in the Irish Sea, I find that hard to believe. But then again, you do have things like people seeing things in shifts in time and shifts. I had a tremendous experience once where reality actually changed for me, and I wasn't alone when I experienced it. A person with me both experienced it, and we found ourselves in what was essentially a different version of reality. I don't know if I've spoken about this, but I'll speak about this sometime. And funny enough, it took place on a mountain overlooking the Irish Sea, where our whole perception and vision and way of seeing the world changed. We were look up in the mountains over Dublin picking magic mushrooms, and we didn't find any, and we got out of the van, and suddenly we could see the whole world below us. There was no atmospheric haze. We could see tremendous distances. We could see as far as the Isles of Scotland, up past, I'm talking about the Hebrides, past Northern Ireland. We could see right across the entire width of Ireland and see the mountains in Connemara sticking over the curvature in the earth. We could see every building and every tower and church steeple in between. We could look clearly across the Irish Sea and see the ferries coming back across to Wales and all the way as far as Liverpool, and follow the English coastline all the way up Cumbria as far as Scotland, the west coast of Scotland, as well as seeing, the size of, we couldn't see behind us because there's mountains behind us, but the two of us couldn't believe what we were seeing. We were seeing a super real version of the world, and we could see the city of Dublin below us, and we could nearly count every single house. And I wasn't on my own when we saw it, and we were just sitting there, and he was just a fellow I worked with. He wasn't a mate, that close a mate, but it was like the two of us were just sitting there saying, how come everything is so clear? How come we can see forever? How come we can see vast distances? And for years I put it down to just that one day, it was just perfect atmospheric conditions. and there was no atmospheric haze, but I think it was something more than that. I think we actually slipped into some kind of other version of reality, and our perceptions were expanded outside the bandwidth, shall we say, and we saw things in a very different way and a very clear way. And that guy who was flying, that wrote the letter, who was flying between Wales and Northern Ireland, something similar could have happened to him. He could have seen a different version of reality. Just like, he saw that video a few years ago when a city appeared on a waterfall in China. These things happen all the time. And they're very widely reported, going right back to Charles Fort back in the Victorian era with the Book of the Damned. That cities have appeared in the sky all over the world, and people have looked up and seen, say, New York above, Liverpool, and saw the people in the streets like they could wave to them, and, cars moving. And that video that was posted about 4 or 5 years ago on YouTube of the city appearing in the river in China, and you could see the downtown. It just goes to show you how fleeting and delicate and transient and unconcrete our view of reality is. And if the right conditions manifest, this world that we see can throw in different views, make us see it in a whole different way. And that's what I believe happened to me and myself and that guy I was working with that day on top of the mountain outside Dublin. But I also believe that's, if we're not dealing with a secret island, like I said, hiding a secret island in the middle of the Irish Sea would be very, very difficult. But however, this guy may have seen a different version of reality in that state, and he saw an island that would probably have been transferred from somewhere else through this correct atmospheric condition. Fascinating world we live in. Fascinating view of reality. There's always something to learn. There's always new ways to look at things. And this is the beauty of seeing the world beyond the lords of perception. This is the beauty of having an open mind. That's not, when I say an open mind, I don't believe that you see a light in the sky and you say the aliens are here. That you see a strange light in the sky and you say, wow, what is that? That could be any number of things I'm going to find out. And that's what my belief in this whole thing is. That's a Fortean belief and a Fortean pursuit. That supernatural, you do not pin concrete or absolute meanings on it. You explore all the possibilities and you let it drift out there to see what the result may be. It's like Charles Fort, the great man himself, said, I don't believe anything to be a fact. I just believe that certain things come into fashion and they're accepted for a while. But one thing I do believe is a fact is I think that Kate Bush is a genius, and we're going to play the first song of the night, and then hopefully I think Adam is coming on after this, and it's going to be Army Dreamers. And that was Kate Bush with Army Dreamers from the album The Dreaming, which came out about 1982. An album that took years to grow on me, mainly because I didn't think the experimental style of mixing Irish and Aboriginal Australian music worked. But I have to say, in the years since, the album has really has grown on to me, and I can see it's a masterpiece. So that was Army Dreamers by Kate Bush. Before I go on with Adam, I believe I have a caller on the line. Can you let the caller through, Steve, if they're still there? Hello, caller. Do we have a caller?
He is there, but he's obviously not answering.
Not there?
Well, he is here, but he's not. I don't think he realises.
Oh, okay.
They've hung up.
Oh, well. We thought we had a caller. Anyway, is Adam there?
I am indeed here, Thomas.
Oh, great stuff. Now, I'm delighted to hear you here tonight. Now, before we go on and talk about what myself and Adam are going to talk about tonight, as I said in the intro to the show, this is not an abstinence forum. This is not, we're not trying to get a prohibition on psychedelics. We're just trying to tell you, listen, folks, you've got to be careful, like the Sweet Catcher and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, when they're waving in front of your face. That's not good. So, well, at least it's not something you should be wary about. Now, if you think that, if you're placing all your hopes in tripping or stoning your way through to victory over the globalists, you can forget about it, because that's not going to happen. That's not what they want. In fact, they want you stoned. and they want you tripping so you're not interfering with their plans. And Adam from CerebralRevolt.com is on back again with me tonight, and this time we're going to do an in-depth, well, Adam is, I'm just going to play the sort of radio host go tonight, an in-depth look at what I've come to know as the DMT PSYOP and what implications it has for the alternative movement and society in general, because as far as I'm concerned, they've never done us favours in the past. They're not going to do us favours in the future. And as Clint Eastwood said in the Outlaw Josie Wales, don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining. So Adam, welcome, and what news do you have for us? What tidings have you brought to us regarding this issue?
I've built many tidings, lots of things to say. Obviously, we've been planning this for a while, wanting to go into some real depth on this issue and give it its dues and explain, the whole history behind this drug and, this new evolving or expanding cultural phenomenon, if you want to call it that. And I think it would be good to start at the beginning and just sort of work our way forward, almost in a chronological order, if you will. I mean, if you're going to throw the ball to me and let me run with it, then I'll just do that. Basically, we decided to talk about this because this is something that's fast becoming a much more popular mainstream phenomenon. I mean, it hasn't been really like that for it's only a very recent thing, really, in history that this ancient sort of shamanic, shall we say, psychedelic drug, that was part of a lot of the South American cultures and has been for thousands of years, is now being brought out into the mainstream and promoted by a number of key cultural pundits, as being some sort of solution to the global predicament. It's being tied into and associated with a lot of the so-called truth material or conspiracy material, or, whatever you want to call it, alternative media, those types of outlets and some of those types of pundits, there's a number of them, especially that I'll mention later on, have been gradually basically, bringing back, establishing this drug as basically some form of solution. And the most common, the most obvious case of that would be that film, The Spirit Molecule. I'm not sure how many people in the audience have seen that. It was done.
Very slick.
Very, very slick. It was very, I think it was done a couple of years ago from memory. As all the key players that are well known for promoting the whole DMT sort of cause and the whole DMT phenomenon and all the rest of it. Very, very slick, very, very well done in terms of production, high production value. Obviously got a lot of money behind it. Had a fair few celebrities, well, at least some celebrities and, journalists and, academics and all the rest of it.
And even rabbis and priests and everything.
They had rabbis, they had priests. There was a whole bunch of people all basically saying, oh my God, this drug is great and this drug is the way. Basically leading towards the conclusion this drug is like the solution and stuff like that, and this drug is the new step, and it's the next step in our spiritual and sociological evolution, and it's basically...
One of the things I noticed was that they were in each individual expert or pundit they had, they were gearing it towards their own specific thing. So the rabbi was saying that it ties in perfectly with the Talmud, the Torah. Sorry, the scientist was saying that by seeing aliens, it made me want to look into transhumanism. She was telling that kind of element.
Yeah, that's right.
It was an elixir for everyone's cure.
That's exactly it. I did notice that. I mean, they had a whole bunch of people on, everyone from just mainstream cultural pundits, like people like Joe Rogan, I've mentioned before, and everyone from him to artists like Alex Gray, novelists and researchers like Graham Hancock, to a whole bunch of different academics. They even had Douglas Rushkoff, the documentary maker, on there, although he was, in his defense, a little bit more sort of unbiased and a little bit more critical of the whole thing. But regardless, they as you say, they catered to every audience. They basically made the drug look very, very appealing to every demographic out there, whoever you were, of whatever religion, creed, race, or belief system you come from. It was basically promoting the idea that this is the spirit molecule, and that this is because the drug DMT is something that is produced naturally in our own body system, in our own systems, in our own bodies. They were basically drawing the conclusion that, well, okay, if it's produced in our own bodies, in certain small amounts, then obviously our bodies have evolved along with this plant and are actually designed to take this drug. So they were basically promoting the idea that the human body was actually designed to take DMT, that this is actually should be part of our diet almost,
Yeah, they did the same in the past with dopamine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same thing. They were basically, drawing that conclusion over and over again. And as you said, with so many of these different people from different areas and walks of life and different interests and backgrounds, all promoting the same message, that this was like, this was the way forward, this was the future, this was the biggest revelation in terms of, chemistry, in terms of ethnopharmacology, in terms of, countercultural movements, psychedelics, in terms of, anti-establishment, in terms of counterculture, that this was it. Basically that was the conclusion of this film. It was put across very, very strongly, and as you said, with high production value. But to give people a bit of background, a bit of history, basically what DMT is just it's one of the active ingredients in a brew that is called ayahuasca, which is has been traditionally taken by many of the South American cultures for thousands of years to get their psychedelic shamanic religious experience, and that's fine. And again, it's like you said before, we're not saying that taking psychedelics is a bad thing, or that people shouldn't do it, or that it's going to completely wreck your brain and wreck your life just if you try it once or whatever. And I'm not saying that nothing good at all can come from this, but it's the difference between that and proposing this as an actual solution to basically almost every problem in the world, which is what the films like The Spirit Molecule do, and what so many of these proponents do. But basically, yeah, as I was saying, the DMT is one of the active ingredients in this brew called ayahuasca. So basically, they take these South American tribes would take a plant containing DMT and a few other plants, and they would mix it into a brew and drink it as a tea, and you'd go on this sort of psychedelic, shamanic, journey, like a trip.
One of the things that made them one of the things they kept pushing with that idea was that the secondary plant was the inhibitor, and was the inhibitor that stopped your stomach acids from actually breaking down the DMT, so you experience a trip. And they made it sound like this miraculous thing, like there's no way. How was it ever possible that these tribes people found two plants of all the millions of plants out there that was in? There's numerous examples of this in history. The yeast in bread and all kinds of other things. Yeast in beer.
Yeah.
I mean, human beings have long been experimenting with different kinds of elixirs, and they would have had hundreds of years to find this experiment and make it work.
Yeah,
or accident, it could have happened. So it was, but they kept making out it was meant to happen.
It was meant to happen. It was part of our natural.
Like you have a destiny with this plant.
We have a destiny with this plant. Exactly. They were basically talking about how because DMT is produced in our own bodies and is released by the brain in small amounts and in certain doses for to keep the body functioning. And I'm not sure how the chemistry of that works, but basically because it's part of our own brains, and I think produced by the pineal gland. If I'm not, I could be wrong on that, but basically.
It's a theory.
It's basically it's like you said, it's fate. It's like, we've evolved along with this plant. This plant is actually part of us. We're connected to this plant. And so hence the idea of the whole spirit molecule. It's like this plant is part of us. We're part of this plant. We're the same species almost. We need it.
That was the angle McKenna. That was the angle McKenna used with the mushroom.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
They were a fellow species.
A fellow species. Exactly. That's right. That's right. But anyway, so you've got the ayahuasca brew, which is what these tribes people brew down in South America, and what that does is inhibits the DMT from being broken down and absorbed and processed by the liver. And basically gives you a longer trip. So what most people do, because obviously they don't have the expertise and the knowledge to make proper ayahuasca, what they will do is they will just procure some DMT in some powder form and smoke it. And if you smoke or, whatever it is, inject or however, I've never taken it myself, so I don't know, but, however you take DMT, basically, if you take just DMT by itself, it only lasts for about 15 minutes. The effect is immediate, and then it only lasts for about 15 minutes. You basically, trip out, and it's kind of like Salvia Medora or something like that. It's one of these fast-acting drugs where all of a sudden you're just totally in another world, and then you boom, back to reality again. Whereas with ayahuasca, when it's mixed with these other plants into a brew, the effect is much slower, and it basically, as you said, it basically inhibits your body from processing it quickly and more quickly, and so you have a longer sort of journey, a longer psychedelic trip. And so that's why, all these people, we've got this whole sort of almost subculture now of people going down to, the South America. And there's so many different parts of South America as well, going down there and, paying for their experience, paying some modern shaman, to brew them up some DMT and so they can all just sit around in a circle and play bongo drums and it's just like the hippie movement back in the 60s, And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be fun or that there could
free choice.
Free choice, exactly. And if I'm not saying that it wouldn't be maybe fun, you might get something out of it, and it could be a really cool experience, and it might maybe enlighten you in some way. But of course, that's very, very different from the way it's being promoted right now as almost a new religion, basically. They've almost turned this thing into a god. They've turned a chemical into a god almost. And some of the stuff that was said in that film, The Spirit Molecule, were actually amounted to that. I mean, there was actually some quotes in there. I can't remember exactly who they were from because there's so many of them. But there were actually some quotes in that film, The Spirit Molecule, that basically where the people were amounting this molecule, DMT, to a god. To the new god, to a new religion. Quite overtly. And
there's a guy who sells like package holidays. He's an English guy down, I think somewhere down in Peru, where you can stay in these chalets and go be taken on your little trips. The guy's unbelievably posh. I don't know his name.
Big business. But, and these shops be making a bit of money as well.
And this guy has obviously he's obviously got big investment somewhere to buy this property or rent it, fit out the chalets, heavily promoted. And he's promoting it like package holidays. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
That's it. You can actually get.
It's 2 weeks in Benidorm for wealthy spiritual motherfuckers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like instead of getting on EasyJet and going to Alicante for a week once a year, you can now go down to Peru with Thomas Cook and get your ayahuasca tour, or whatever it is. It's that's the way it's going, and I'm sure these tribesmen down there, are quite happy that all these naive Westerners are coming down and paying them lots of money to give them their experience, And I'm not saying that they're bad people for doing that, obviously.
No, but what you're going to get, you're going to
get charlatans.
You're going to get elements and parasites and psychopaths who will move in, especially when you have lots of cute, pretty white girls, and I'm not saying it's a racial thing, but this is just a fact of it. Well, cute young hippie chicks and new age girls down there, stoned, are going to be a magnet for all kinds of cretins and creeps from miles around.
Oh yeah, and it's been very appealing to women.
And the ones going on the planes with them from our side.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to show it's not, they're everywhere.
Yeah. It's there's so many appeals, so much appeal, in this whole thing for so many different reasons. But that's basically the rundown of what the drug is. DMT is basically the cheap Western way of having your ayahuasca experience, where instead of having to make a brew and go to South America, you can procure this stuff. I'm pretty sure it's illegal in the UK, but you can get it somehow. I don't know, but anyway, you basically smoke it or whatever, and you get your 15-minute high, and that's what's being most popular. Unless you got to go down to South America and pay for the full package and do your full experience and all the rest of it. But this was basically something that was only practiced by South American tribes up until I believe the sort of the mid 80s, when a guy called Rick Strassman, who was basically an academic studying things like sleep paralysis, and he was studying some of the more paranormal effects that have come up again and again through time, and he was basically interested in some of these things like alien abductions and paranormal experiences and sleep paralysis and all near-death experiences and all that type of stuff. And apparently, according to him, he just so happened upon, this whole idea of DMT, and DMT being produced, by the human body, and these other tribesmen, down in South America actually taking DMT deliberately to have some sort of spiritual experience, and became very interested in it. And it just so also happens that this guy, Dr. Rick Strassman, ended up deciding that he wanted to research DMT, and was given a grant to do so by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry Fund.
Really, I didn't know that
foundation.
One.
Yeah,
and he got a special dispensation by the FDA in America to conduct the test.
He did. He got a special dispensation. They basically changed the rules. There was the FDA had banned basically research of this type of this nature up until I think there had been a law in effect for about 30 years, I believe. I can't remember what law it was, but it was the FDA or something like that. Which had prohibited, the academic study of, subjects, drug use and human reactions to certain drugs and drug experimentation and all that kind of stuff. But basically, he got a sanction. His research was basically immediately sanctioned. So the laws were basically changed for him, it would appear, at least anyway, whilst at the same time he was being given a lot of money through the main foundation of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which I think is just called the Scottish Rite Foundation. And there's a video with Dr. Rick Strassman on the internet. You can look it up on YouTube, where he is basically talking about how he got into this whole thing. And he actually admits for a moment there that, he was funded by the Freemasons to do this. And there's this little moment in the video where he looks kind of nervous and a bit guilty and a bit like, yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have said that sort of thing, It was
wow.
Quite an interesting little clip. If you watch, as I said, I wish I could remember the name of the clip, but if people look around, it's one of the older videos, I think. It's at least 10 years older, so I think from memory, but it's got him talking about the fact that he was given money from the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry to conduct this research. He was given a grant to go and research DMT and to obviously start popularizing it. And so following on from, sorry?
It's just like the Freemasons back in the opium trade days.
Well, yeah, of course.
Through the East India Company,
yep,
and the Grand Orient Company, and the Hudson Bay Company.
Yep,
the same characters again funding these drug trades.
And and of course you've got the fact that through Dr. Strassman's research, and all of the findings and the papers that he wrote, you had people like Terence McKenna started to become involved, and I'm sure people know about him and who he was and what he stood for and all the rest of it. And he's very, very popular among sort of DMT enthusiasts, because he was the first guy to really come out there. You had the scientist on one hand, who was like, as I said before, like a modern version of Tim O'Leary. He came out to validate the drug. He came out to wearing his white coat with his doctor, the PhD, after his name, he's even an authority figure to say, right, this drug is good, this drug is okay, we should experiment more on it, we should, explore it, we should examine it, we should, this drug is the way forward. So he was the authority figure. And then you had, on the other side, you had Terence McKenna, who was the cultural pundit, the guy to promote all of the ideas, and all of the sociological, psychological, whatever, ideas that were attached to this drug, and all of the religious ideas that go along with it. So you had, the sort of the scientific and the cultural promotion of this drug, beginning to develop, quite rapidly together towards the end of the 80s and the early 90s. And, of course, Terence McKenna was most active throughout the 90s, doing all sorts of talks and coming up with all sorts of theories and doing lectures and presentations and interviews on the whole concept of DMT and it had all these theories about how, it was the next step in human evolution and how, basically, if the world took DMT, we'd all basically evolve into some higher state of being. And he even mentioned the whole transhuman project as well. He
was a big time into that. And his brother Dennis is a big time pusher of transhumanism.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of the people that are into the DMT thing are also, very, very sympathetic, shall we say, to the transhuman cause, and have connections to that whole movement. But so Dennis McKenna managed to wrap all this. Terence McKenna managed to combine all of these elements together. The beginnings of people didn't really know what transhumanism was back then in the 90s, because it wasn't something that had been really suggested or promoted in the media. But he basically started to establish the idea that this was basically this was to be the new religion. This was the natural way forward. We've got scientific validation. The
human brain is a computer.
The human brain is a computer. We've got it. All sorted out here. We've got it figured out. We've got the science behind us. It all makes sense. This is absolutely it. The whole world needs to basically take DMT, and we all need to ascend to some, next dimension or something like that.
You can see the genesis of all that stuff in I've got some psychology academic textbooks, for modules and courses back from the 1990s. And there you can see the genesis of behavioral psychology, particularly in cognitive psychology, pushing this early transhumanist idea of the brain being a computer, coupled with the idea of behavioral drugs that will come along that will actually help blend these two ideas together. Yeah. I mean, this thing has been going, and this is all to say, these textbooks came out the same time that McKenna, from his highly expensive property in Hawaii, which is probably the most expensive place in the world to live, playing the hippie and was traveling around the world. And now it's come out now that McKenna was, in fact, on the CIA payroll.
That's right. Well, just like Timothy O'Leary, who was the guy who came out in the 60s in his white coat, the scientist, the authority figure to say, hey, LSD is okay. And the LSD is good. The scientific community, the ones who know best, the experts, we've given you permission to take this drug, basically. And, you've got the same thing here with Rick Strassman, and it's just the same thing again. Bring some authority figure out there to validate the drug and to basically say that we're going to give you permission to do this. It's okay to do this now, and that's the answer, and all these other ideas. So it is basically, as you say, the same thing. Well, it's just like, I think you referred to it in our last conversation as like LSD 2.0, basically. It's the same old thing,
And even the precursors are the same. Like in the 1950s, you had the growth of heroin usage and the popularization of the heroin idea through like William Burroughs and, books like Junkie, and even even Crowley, Confessions of a Drug Fiend. Yeah. And so that popularized and made drug, heroin and opium and morphine use big in those days. And then you had LSD being touted as a cure, a treatment for it. And you had the same thing again right before the whole DMT psilocybin at Ohio. You had movies like Train Spotting about it was glamorizing the fun taking of heroin in Scotland. You had Christina F. You had all kinds of cultural motifs. And like where I was living in Dublin, flooded with heroin, and here we are back again after the heroin is gone. We can now, and they did the same thing with then that was serotonin and through the ecstasy. Yeah. And now we're back to square one again, and there always seems to be a pharmacological payoff at the end of it, I've noticed, and somehow. There's always the big pharma companies always seem to come in at the end and scoop the casualties up. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I want to go get a cup of tea, but we've got to have another song play now. This is Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush.
Oh, cool.